Good morning, everyone. So on behalf of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities, Winston Yap and I, Rafael, would like to thank you all for joining the workshop. And the title, as you know, is Reimagining the Urban in the Post-Pandemic Era, Health and Citizen Participation in Southeast Asia and Latin America. So, so this is going to be an event for 2 days, and there will be 6 panels. The workshop in general is envisaged as a sharing forum on the following themes: authoritarianism, nationalism, health awareness, infrastructural reform, justice and resilience, and urban reimagination. So for today, we will have, so for this first session, we will have our keynote speaker, and it is one of the pleasures of being here with you today is that I got to know a bit about our keynote speaker, and it is a great pleasure to introduce Mr. Marco Kusumawijaya. Let me tell you a little bit about Marco. Marco is the co-founder and director of Rojak Center of Urban Studies in Indonesia. Marco is an architect, urbanist, and he's also an art curator, producer, activist, and advocating eco-social justice. And Marco currently is working on a book project. The title of this book project is Indonesian Cities, an Introduction for Everyone. So without further ado, let me pass the mic to Marco. Marco, welcome, and thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you, Rafael, for the introduction. May I be allowed to share screen?
Absolutely, Marco.
To do that, I need you guys to stop sharing yours.
Sure.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. I feel bad that I could not see you all, but I think this is something new that we have to adapt ourselves to this pandemic situation. The title I gave to Rafael is actually kind of, it just popped out from my mind when I was asked, questioning the future of urban futures. But then I just told Rafael that I actually don't have much imagining, regarding the title of this workshop, Reimagining the Urban in the Post-Pandemic Era. I found it quite difficult actually to imagine things yet to come because things are still very unstable, information change every day. So I think what I would like to share is some sort of preconditions or prerequisite that we need to create in order to imagine better, and also to share with you some of our center's efforts in doing this. So, as you know, we are not done yet. I heard that this last week, Singapore started lockdown, so calm down and don't chiong to your nearest supermarket. I don't know, Rafael, if you know the meaning of chiong. I think it's Hokkien-ese. It means don't storm with panic into your shops, And in Jakarta last week, this is a big celebration, and people got worried because the government came out with kind of contradictory policy not to allow people to go back to their hometown, but they say the tourist destination will remain open. So people kind of flock to beaches, park, etc. So that's what we have. The situation. It's the reverse. The upper right picture is India. The lower right is Indonesia. It's kind of 1 week or 4 days. 2 months difference. But people are going out. And then if you look at the news from actually, it's not just news. I mean, the economists kind of cover a lot of things almost every week or a few days. After a few days, you have new things they're reporting. And the last thing is that evidence is mounting that long COVID is a real threat to global health. Long in two senses. One is that I think they found in London that when people got COVID now, it lasts very long before the recovery. And then long in the second sense is that, you know, it's coming back. Like Singapore might have second wave, and Indonesia have not even gone through the first wave yet. And then in Paris now you have second or even third wave. And the economists, I think, last month exposed some very optimistic kind of a projection that economies will kind of rebound after uh, pandemics or other disaster in the past. But then they corrected it. They say, you know, it's not going to always happen. This time it may not rebound as quick as possible. So on the upper right of the screen, you see the projection is very strong because people believe it happened before. After the first war, the first World War, the Second World War, economies kind of bounced back very, very quickly, you know. But, you know, basically every day something's new come up, right? There are always optimistic view, like the one on my left, on the screen's left corner, upper corner, a workshop, I think sometime next week, The Future Will Be Bright, it's titled. So we are moving between optimism and pessimism. But I think that if optimism really means getting back to pre-pandemic conditions, I think we do have reasons to be pessimistic. I will tell you later why. This is another example of what happened in Jakarta with the government's contradictory policy. And now Jakarta is locking down its parks and its beaches and its I think also some other destinations for tourists because of the fear of very soon. I think this week, very soon there will be a kind of another burst, clusters everywhere. Also, our Ministry of Health is also preparing more beds, etc. So, you know, there are a lot of unstable things about data, about knowledge, and there are a lot of people still coping with the situation. This is the last projection or estimate from the economist that says that actually the real number of deaths is much higher, 2 or 3 times than those that are reported. And the main contribution is Asia, if you look at this right lower corner of it. And then I quoted something from The Guardian on the case in India, that it was because of some tragic miscalculations based on false premise. False premise meaning that the knowledge of what is going on is really not solid as yet. So we are still, I think, have a lot of anxieties about how do we interact, and also mostly also about how do we travel, right? So I think while it is okay that the pandemics have prompted a haste in imagining the post-pandemic future, but you know, rarely with any confidence. I think the haste to imagine the future itself is something, a modernity, in the sense that the future is increasingly seen as a resource that we need to claim, you know, as if that if we claim the future earlier, then we own it. I think as many as possible conversations are therefore important and useful, because the more conversations we have, the more the imagination would be kind of inclusive, collective, and in a way more complete, whether or not we can achieve some sort of completeness. So I think while the data is still not very solid yet, we somehow can use imagining as a provocation for us to make us think about what is needed to know, and really do not need to aim at any conclusion yet. So programs, projects, works on pandemic, something, there are a lot of conversation about that. There's this post-pandemic urban, as we are doing. There are also post-pandemic economics. There are also post-pandemic artistic imagination. Tomorrow, actually, I would have another talk with some colleagues in Taiwan and in Southeast Asia about what art can do to help imagining the future. But as my previous slides show, actually the urgent priority is still on coping with the pandemics, because it's coming again and again. So the question is, do we really have enough knowledge? Well, I don't think so. But I think we can do both, practicing solidarities in coping with the pandemics, which are still going on, but at the same time, kind of practicing the solidarity simultaneously as a way to kind of generate knowledge together. I think that is hopefully what need to be done and can be done, so we could achieve, say, a more collectively imagined future in the future. But of course, we need to enable more people's voice into the collective imagining. And because for the majority of our southern urban population, it is even yet impossible to imagine the future. They have to cope with the pandemics in much pain and difficulties. If you go out to kampungs in Jakarta or even to other places in other cities, I'm sure a lot of people are still very concerned and very difficult to imagine what to do tomorrow or next week. At the same time, I think because of the outstanding problem, the pandemic is revealing actually more blatantly urban, regional, national, and even global inequalities. The last picture published by, I don't know where it is published actually, but I got it from the Twitter account of Greta Thunberg that shows that vaccination in different countries are showing a lot of gap. Rich countries are being vaccinated like 5 or 20 times faster than poor countries. But it also happened within a country or within a region. In Indonesia, there are a lot of discrepancy between vaccination rate in Jakarta and vaccination rate in other provinces or in other cities. So a lot of inequity that are being revealed even more blatantly because of these pandemics. And then, of course, we have to think not to forget when we imagine the post-pandemic future, the outstanding issues in southern metropolis. We already have distancing and exclusion and marginalization and widening gaps even before the pandemics. The pandemics widen them, make them worse. Yeah, inequity in access to housing, to water. I will illustrate that with a few more slides later. Excessive production and consumption in one place and less in other places. Inefficient distribution, as you can say, because of this hunger in one place and of overconsumption in other places. And of course, these issues about unsustainable linear metabolism. So I don't think we should be distracted from the issues of climate change. And I think we should actually try to see both pandemics and climate change together and kind of attack it together and see if it is possible to solve both problems at the same time, because otherwise it will happen again and again and getting worse. So the question is, if we kind of imagine the post-pandemic future of the urban, in a way trying to produce new urbanism, the question is, will solutions to those outstanding issues be included? So what needs to change in the way we imagine, and how far and how fundamentally we can change? That's, I think, a very key question. Uh, I just want to show you a slide that I made a long time ago, which is not now very much touched upon. The fact that actually the cause of the pandemic and the cause of climate change is the same, which is the aggressive and expansive urbanization. You know, I think at the very early stage, when the pandemics broke out, I think there are some research saying that the virus jumped from animals to human Homo sapiens to human species because of the the expansive urbanization in China that made people live too close together with wild animals. And at the same time, we are taking the spaces of many other species. So the contact became too close and the jump happened. I think it only mentioned a few times during the first few months of the pandemics, and nobody talked about it afterwards. So I think it is very urgent to kind of remind people of this, that the root of the problem of climate change and the pandemics is actually the same, which is now called aggressive and expansive urbanization. I will pass this very quickly because this is more about what to do. Of course, what to do depends on two things. One is, do we just deal with the consequences, or do we want to solve the root problem, which is the urbanization process itself? So in a way, to kind of imagine the future should really based on how we reflect upon this aggressive and expansive urbanization. Uh, and I think because of that, we need to think the urban as within the natural world. You know, the metaphor of upstream and downstream, which is cyclic actually, is not only metaphor, but it's also physically right, physically in terms of the physical world of the natural world, because cities are mostly situated between the mountain and the sea, between the upstream and the downstream. And actually that is metaphorically true for most of resources that we are using to build the cities. And the problem is most of these flows are unnatural in the sense it's becoming more linear than cyclic. You know, when we process some material from the earth, we do not get it back to the nature, but we kind of just expand them and then kind of waste them. A very different process from nature, which would have the same water recycled again and again naturally, although we pollute a lot, but still the nature so far managed to recycle the water through, you know, the natural cycle of water, the cloud coming down to the mountain, etc. But for me, looking at the urban within the natural world means also to see the continuum of cities and nature, and at the same time to respect. I refuse the word to love because I think love is a wrong conception to be applied to nature. Because to love, you need to love someone or something that can reciprocate, but nature cannot reciprocate your love. This actually provokes the objectification of nature. You know, if you say you love something that cannot reciprocate your love, then you are objectifying it. So this is, I think the right thing is to respect nature. So respect also means to respect other species within and without the urban. And this would also include not only the species, but also, you know, non-species elements like water, rocks, etc. That we talked a lot about water. And then to try to go back to circular metabolism as much as possible. And I think more commons would be more sustainable, as the nature have kind of told us. So, but we need to see also what other disciplines are doing. I think I'm glad to hear Raphael said that there are people from other disciplines in this workshop. That would be very nice. Because you know what is in the air now? The radical ecologists hope for more radical change in production and consumptions, perhaps a serious reduction instead of reuse, recycle, or upcycle even. And economists are occupied with predicting when to recoup the growth rate or hope for a change towards more commons. You know, between the two extremes, we have economists who are talking about more commons, and there are economists who are very optimistic about that, the fact that we will recoup the growth rate again. So again, talking about growth. While you know the social justice activists advocate fundamental reorientation towards equity instead of growth. I think urbanists need to connect with them, need to have conversation with them, and develop something practical. In histories, a lot of ideas got materialized because of urbanist architects in the physical terms, right? So, but we need to listen to the other disciplines for really the substance of what to materialize. Uh, and again, I think another thing to do as a precondition or prerequisite for more kind of collective and complete imagination is we can start listing a lot of opportunities or threats. It depends on how you see it, good or bad, and for whom. Yeah, these are just a temporary list. A lot of these are coming out from news, from government report, etc. I think we can. This is far from excessive, or this is far from complete. We can go on with this. Um, this is an illustration about the water situation in Jakarta, about what Rujak did. We found out when the government kind of issued the guideline that you need to wash your hand very often, almost like, you know, every time you move from one space to another. We found out in many kampungs in northern Jakarta, there is no water, piped water supply, and it is very expensive. People have to spend actually much more money there buying water than the richer people in the southern Jakarta. So we advocated to the government that they should provide water. Otherwise, you know, we use the argument not to spread the virus, uh, to provide access to water to the poor community in northern Jakarta. And actually they did. Because you cannot ask people to wash water if they have to buy water at the cost kind of 2 or 3 times higher than those who have kind of piped water access. Uh, so water inequality is very real. Even in Jakarta, you have only 50 or 54% of coverage. In other cities, even lower or higher, a little bit. In Surabaya, it's higher. So not everybody in Jakarta has water access. I think this is also true in many other southern cities. And also the price is very different. You look at the chart on the right side, you see the water access coverage, the piped water, it's not even the drink water, it's just piped, clean water. In Jakarta, coverage is the lowest, but the price is the highest. And in Surabaya, the coverage is the highest, the price is the lowest. And then you have in between them. And on the right, you have a comic about how water inequity, but you look at the picture on the left, which is from Google Earth in the southern Jakarta, is real. You know, on my left-hand side, these houses have their individual swimming pool, and on the right, you have these people in the kampung who might not have any pipe water access. So I think it is necessary to do at the same time solidarity practices and use the solidarity practices to co-produce knowledge about what happened in our cities. These are the things that Rujak have been doing for some time. I think this is another report that we produced, families in time of pandemics. It is done through conversations with 12 cities, not including Jakarta, 12 towns and cities. They are very small towns, 50,000 people. And then there are 2.5 or 3 million people of Surabaya and Semarang. And there is a focus about what happened to families. I will not go to detail, but basically, at the same time, doing those kind of solidarity practices together with other communities and with civil societies. At the same time, we engage ourselves in conversations and try to sort of, you know, extract any knowledge as much as we can and then produce them into a report, very colorful, very easy to read with a lot of illustration by graphic designers. And another report coming out from the what we call the urbanist school that we organize every year. This just last year, and the report was published a few months ago. It's about resilience, hope, and possibilities. But again, we did not try to imagine yet. We just collecting what happens in the cities in different parts of the cities with all the differences of settlement, etc. Um, um, well, you have this data, for example. It is about the mobility report in Jakarta. Of course, it is going down after some measures are taken since March 2020. And the mobility is reduced to only 10% or even less than before, right? But these are because of policies, because of measures. If we kind of let free or kind of cancel this measure, we don't know what will happen yet. As we saw in the previous and the first slide, people would go out, storm places because of the stress that people have been staying at home too much. So there are a lot of instability in this data yet. We need to collect this more. Um, and then I think a very nice reminder from my colleague in Singapore from TheaterWorks, Ong Keng Sen. I think he's just started a new program called Perform. He said possible futures are already happening close to home within the global south. It may involve knowledge that has been forgotten, left behind, or even repressed. So I think this is a very important precondition or prerequisite for a more collective imagining of the future. We need to enable people to remember what was before, and what was before might need to be changed instead of to keep the same. So going back to normal is not an option, because the normal in the past is what has caused the pandemics in one way or another, as the first slide showed, the expansive kind of urbanization. And another colleague, Abdul Malik Simon, said, also agreeing with us, that maybe we need to kind of suspend any imagination and try to collect more knowledge. And for me, what I would add is really to do the knowledge co-production together with this kind of what I call practices of solidarity, working with the communities. In that way, we enable the community to also try to imagine the future. At the same time, we together also produce knowledge that might not be available if not directly from them. So this is an example of a conversation that Rujak will organize. I think it's actually next week, right? So it's about solidarity, resistance, and recovery. Again, trying to actualize this idea of co-production of knowledge, while at the same time, kind of practice solidarity with communities with other people. I think this is at least true or necessary for the southern cities, small or big. I don't know about the northern cities, because it is not about being rich or poor, but it is about how far the governments are able to be in charge. I think it's quite typical in the southern cities that the governments are not very confident. And as in the case of Jakarta, the policies are often contradictory between the local government and the national government. From day one last year, our local government, not only in Jakarta, are always conflicting the national government because the national thinks about, the general terms of growth of economies, etc. But the local, in a way, you can say, the urban thinks about, day-to-day coping with the pandemic. So I think these two conflicts are not in the sense of it is not just a coincidence. I think it is structural. This conflict simply happens because of the different outlooks between the national government and the local government are taking. Because both, each of them kind of deal with different issues. If you are at national level, you think in abstract ways. If you are in local government, you think very real. How many beds you have in your hospitals, and etc. etc. Another thing is going to happen tomorrow, continuing our research on the coastal areas. Why the coastal areas? Because most of the coastal areas in Java and maybe also in other towns in Indonesia are occupied by urban poor. So an act of solidarity need to be carried out in the coastal areas, and we have done some work with artists, curators on how to approach the coastal areas in both artistic way as well in kind of urbanistic way. Am I running out of time? I think I actually ran out of 2 minutes already, so I will be quick to kind of go immediately to the last slide. So kind of this is it, right? I mean, increasing uncertainty and complexity is not new, right? But there are new things in the sense that pandemics makes us more actually frequently globally connected than locally engaged because of the physical inhibition or distancing. We are getting used to stay put while being connected to different places and people globally, sometimes simultaneously. Less travels, but more connections. But these pose kind of challenges. How to use it? To what purpose? Is it more easy to make global strategy, including global solidarity and global environmental solutions, rather than doing the actual kind of solidarity practices, engaging with the local communities? And also, does this change the way we think about being in our cities or anywhere else for this matter? And the digital divide is becoming bigger and bigger because of this, and we need to bridge this. In terms of planning, if you want to go more practical, really very real questions like what about the standard of 1 bed per 1,000 population? That is a WHO standard, right? Is it still kind of holding? It's the same question with regards to kind of climate change. Do we design our drainage system to cope with the maximum storm as it happened in Singapore a few weeks or a few months ago, or not? Yeah, because if we design it to that standard, a lot of things will have to change. If not, what are the measures, etc. So maybe these lockdown situations give us time to slow down and to reflect. But these, of course, have a consequences in economies. And this has terrible consequences for those who have lost jobs and in many informal sectors. So I think this is the changes that we need to initiate. Imagine a process of co-production of knowledge and other non-physical products, giving space for other species, not only because of pandemics, but also to support commitment to reduce climate change. And consciously and deliberately, we need to focus on nurturing and giving voices to the unheard, suppressed, and inarticulate. And all of us need to increase our invent more ways to embrace complexity, diversifying diversity, branching developments of all kind of knowledge and disciplines. It's a kind of a next evolutionary steps that Homo sapiens are, I think, naturally attracted to. You know, dealing with complexity is actually our next step of evolution. I think we are all attracted to it. I think, or at least I hope. So, and I think we need to give serious thoughts and practices to move away from growth. This is not easy, very, very difficult, but I think some thought need to be given. And of course, architecture and urbanism, you know, need to be able to comment on current events to be social. But this needs method. And I think so, when we talk about the urban of the future, we need first to invent methods for urbanism, for our sciences, for our discipline. I think that's all I want to say. Thank you very much. I just want to emphasize that the normal before the pandemics are among the causes of the pandemics, so we cannot go to the normal.
Thank you so much, Marco. It was really enlightening. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate all the effort you put in this presentation. I mean, it's always a pleasure to learn from you. And because of time concern, we will not have enough time to get or to have like a Q&A session. But we would like to invite people, especially those who are going to be, joining virtually later or checking the videos, to ask you questions about your presentations or your presentation. I hope you are going to be fine with that to get some feedback and comments from other people later. So thank you again, Marco. Thank you very much. And so we would like to invite you, Marco, if you have time to join us to the next, to the first panel, which is authoritarianism, emergency governance, which will be led by Professor Luis Angel Guzman from Colombia and Professor Sherwin Onda from the Philippines. So thank you all for attending. We invite you to join the other workshop. You're more than welcome to do that. Thank you again, Marco, and thank you on behalf of the Lee Kuan Yew Center, of course, with my colleague and my colleague Winston. And so thank you very much for your time. Thank you all. So see you in the next panel.
See you.
Thank you, Marco. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I will stay.